Awesome. So we are here with Shelley Golan, talking about the different ways to fundraise as an impacts-driven entrepreneur, and talking about like what makes sense for who, and maybe starting to talk about how you could go about that, tools, resources in each stream of funding. So Shelley, do you want to just introduce yourself, give people some background of where you're coming from?
Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me, Adam. Uh,
Absolutely.
my my background is as a founder. I started my career founding two agriculture technology startups, so definitely very close to kind of the impact space from the get-go. And I did that in New York, where I'm from. I ended up founding a nonprofit that was all about food justice and food equity, called the New York City Agriculture Collective, that I'm the vice president of today. So very much embedded in this idea of how impact can bring together public and private entities. I moved into the accelerator space of the startup ecosystem, and I ran ed tech accelerators, working with education technology companies in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And I work now as relationship manager for Mercury Bank, which is a bank for startups specifically. Have worked with a lot of VCs and family offices that are impact focused, built a number of financial products from a fintech startup that I helped co-found that was focused specifically on ESG investments. And I really believe in the mission of what Impact Alliance is doing. So really happy to be here.
Cool. I honestly didn't know how uniquely qualified you were for this specific topic when I reached out, but it sounds like you have experience really pretty much from almost every funding stream or method that founders can use, whether for profit or nonprofit. So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So let's just get started with bootstrapping. And I'm just going to kind of go through it and ask you for your perspective. And if there's anything you need to interject on, feel free to cut me off. Um, so bootstrapping is basically just using your money and or customer revenue to fund your business and get it started. We think this is ideal if kind of obviously you have a lot of cash to spend and are willing to use it. Like if you have a lot of money saved up, why not invest that into your business if you really have the conviction that it's going to be successful? If you already have customers, it can be pretty useful because if why not try to just make the margins as such that you can operate off of those margins and grow. If you have maybe a large or passionate group of people who are willing to pre-order your product, that could also come under the term of like crowdfunding, but you could also use pre-orders as a bootstrapping technique. And also, if you just don't need a lot of capital to start, if you just need to cover your living expenses, or even if you have your living expenses already covered by something, that kind of makes bootstrapping ideal for you. So just kind of an overview of, if you're listening to this, like, should I bootstrap? If you have cash in the bank, if you already have paying customers, specifically with a high margin offering, if you have paying customers and a decent percentage of profit per customer, that's a great space to bootstrap from. If you don't need a lot of capital up front, or if you have a large group of people that are willing to pre-order. Am I missing anything, Shelley? Is there any other circumstances that bootstrapping would be helpful, or maybe the best place to go?
Yeah, I think that everything you said is correct. I feel like bootstrapping is more. It falls to me more under the category of phase of fundraising,
Mm,
and there's a strategic element to bootstrapping as well.
mm,
So I think that when you're starting any venture, but I probably specifically an impact focused venture, thinking what are your goals and what are you trying to build and what are your desired outcomes. If you're trying to build a lifestyle business that's going to make a profit and sustain you, and you would ideally like to maybe hand that down to your descendants, that's not a business that venture capital is going to make sense in. So you're likely not going to get too much outside investment. Bootstrapping makes a lot of sense if that's what you want to build, because you're putting the money, your own money into it, and you're incentivized to make a profit and you support the business that way. Um, if you are interested in getting investment, the longer you wait to get investment, the less equity you have to give up. So it's really kind of a personal calculation. And for every founder, it's different of how much of their own resources are they willing and able and can afford to expend on their venture before they need to take outside capital in, with the exchange that that means they're giving up some of their ownership. So it's a toggle that you have to decide based on your long-term goals.
Nice. Nice. I like that. Like at the beginning, you're probably more likely to bootstrap. You will get higher leverage fundraising down the road the longer you go in the bootstrap phase, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then is there any like scenario that you would say would kind of like dissuade someone from bootstrapping or like isn't a good fit for bootstrapping? Like what would make someone say, "Oh, I shouldn't bootstrap right now"?
I think it depends what you're building. For certain tech heavy initiatives or products, the costs can be very, very, very high to develop that. So that may not be realistic
Mhm.
for you to bootstrap, building an entire technical product with like a software team. There's certain things require outside investment unless you happen to be fabulously wealthy, in which case, good
Mhm.
for you. That's the other thing is like bootstrapping doesn't necessarily tie into your current socioeconomic status. It just means you're using your own money. So
Mhm.
whether your own money is like $1,000 a year or $1 million a year, it's still bootstrapping.
Mhm.
The second you invite other people's money into your pot, they take some ownership of your company, then you're no longer bootstrapping. So yeah, I would say like if you have a technical product that requires, is very capital intensive to build, or if you see massive growth opportunity that would make it so attractive to an investor that they would, want to skip any kind of bootstrapping build out and just invest immediately, that also would be a scenario where you could skip it.
Cool. Awesome. Any kind of final thoughts on bootstrapping? Any questions or comments from the audience on bootstrapping before we move on?
Yeah, you guys can also use the chat if you want.
All right. Sounds good. So next is business loans. So this is it's not the most, I guess, flashy form of capital. It's pretty tried and true. Usually it's going to come from a bank or the government or some stable financial institution, um, which is questionable. But so basically, business loan can be ideal if you don't want to give up equity or if you want to build business credit or if you have a clear path to paying back the loan. I think a lot of times people get a loan to like experiment with that money, and I don't think that's a great idea. I feel like venture money might be more suited for that, or even bootstrapping and seeing how minimally you can build out. What are your thoughts on like when someone should go for a business loan?
I think it's important to think that, are you qualified for a business loan? As you kind of touched on, it's not an option that is available to everyone. There's, because it goes through a uh, standard bank, commercial or personal loan process, you have to meet the criteria for it. And the biggest thing that a bank or institution will look at when they make a loan is how likely are you to pay it back?
Mm,
So you'd have to have whatever criteria they're requesting in order, and that could be your own personal collateral, the backup that you have for maybe your business is running already and it's making a profit and you just kind of need this influx of cash for inventory. I'm making something up now.
mm,
But you could prove that that inventory has a market and will be sold, and that's going to be the source of the repayment of the loan. So that's, you have to think about that. It's not it's a good option if you have kind of a running business, or you are able to take out a personal loan and put kind of your own personal assets on the line as kind of a way to repay it. if you're not able to by the time it's due. Um, but I agree. It's not free money. Like, you're going to have to pay it back somehow, and you're going to have to go through whatever the bank asks you in order to qualify for it.
Yeah, so it's really just about making sure in advance that you are confident and like you're confident that you can convince a bank um, or any other institution that you can pay it back or put up the collateral in case of
Yeah.
defaulting. It's cool. Any other thoughts on loans?
Just overall, I think those types of loans, you're probably looking at smaller denominations overall,
Mhm.
like especially on a personal loan, or if you're a newer startup, it's going to be a smaller amount that they'll be looking at. So doubtful that you would be able to take out like a $100,000, business loan if you're just starting out. So keep in mind when you're looking.
Right. That's a good point. Make sure that
Yeah.
it scales with this phase of your organization. Business loans kind of unlike, like as you said, bootstrapping is a phase based thing. Um, and with a loan, it's kind of different based on what phase you are. Femi
Yeah.
says here in a chat, taking up a loan for a startup in Nigeria is quite a task, especially when there's no collateral. Yeah, it's like that's going to be a really tough place to raise money from when
Yeah.
you don't have collateral and you don't have a revenue stream, and you're trying to get a loan. Maybe more difficult in countries that don't have as established economies. I know Nigeria is a fairly established economy. Femi, I know where you are is less developed, so potentially in less developed places, the risk tolerance for banks may be lower. I don't have a lot of knowledge on that. Shelley, do you know kind of how the risk tolerance might change based on where it's at?
Yeah, well, I think it's important. A loan for a startup is a different type of loan than a personal loan or a business loan. If you're just starting out and by nature your business is new and it's a new venture and it is a startup, that's going to be a different. I agree with Femi. It's going to be very difficult because you don't have any collateral, from the business unless you're able to bring it to your own personal, make a personal loan and put your own personal collateral on the line and then use that personal loan money for whatever you want. But overall, I think that a business loan is not, kind of a broad replacement for some of the other funding sources that we could talk about, especially for earlier stage impact companies. Mainly, it's for established businesses, or if you want to take a personal loan on your own collateral for whatever you want to do.
Hmm. So basically, like business loans are for operating businesses unless you want to take a higher personal risk and take out a personal loan. And for that, you need some sort of collateral, whether it be a
Yeah.
house or, money in the bank or whatever that be, stocks or some sort of investment. That's a good point. So yeah, so basically, like if you're a startup, it would be a personal loan, but even then, like a grant may be better because even though it might take a little longer, you're putting yourself under a less um, personal risk. Um, so, okay, cool. And then the next kind of way to fund is angels, friends, and family. So this is kind of like people in your circle, like individual investors. Um, so like usually people raise it's pretty wide ranging from my research, like 10K to like 2.5 million from this, depending on how much money your friends and family have and how many angels you can convince. So the spaces where you want to go for this could be like you're ready to go like really go all in into building your organization because now you're taking external capital and you really want to be committed to returning the value to that capital so you don't ruin all of your personal relationships. um, and it's also good like if you're just good at networking or have a valuable network, this is a lot easier to do if you have high net worth people in your network or if you know how to get in those spaces and start forming those relationships. And I also put it that it's like a good space to start if you have um, a really good knowledge of a problem space, and have like a logical path towards creating a solution, because that's really what investors want to see, whether it be venture capital. But I feel like for these angel friends and family earlier investors, they just want to see that you're thinking about it in the right way, and they might just give you money to explore a little more than venture, where it's like, we're going to give you this money and we need to see XYZ in 3 years. Like that X, Y, and Z is much less defined and definable at the early stage. So is that kind of accurate in your experience with angels, friends, and family?
Yes. Usually an angel round or a friends and family round is kind of your first step that you go to when you want to begin to raise outside capital for your startup. And there's pros and cons attached to it. The pros are it should be a lot easier, ideally, to convince, your close friends and family and your network of the value of what you're building than it is to convince a venture capitalist or another investor. The cons is not everyone has access to high net worth individuals. So I think this is kind of like optional for a lot of people, because a lot of people realistically, don't have immediate people in their friends and family network who could just do that. Um, so that's something to note. There are angel groups. So there's groups. An angel is an individual who's not part of a larger firm or VC that is investing their own money. And so that's why they're called angels. They really, it's about how they feel about it. They don't have to make returns for other people. It's just for them. So the benefit of reaching out to angels is, it would be easier to convince one person than to convince like a board of people like you do for a larger firm. So if you don't have access amongst your close friends and family, there are individual angels out there that, are on LinkedIn or are part of angel groups that you could reach out to and pitch and get investment through there. And angels normally invest on the lower end of the capital spectrum. So they could invest anywhere from, whatever, $1,000 to $250,000, sometimes 500,000, but usually it's under 250K is an average angel investment. And I think the last thing I'll say about it is just because it's from your friends and family or an angel investor doesn't mean that you do not have to do the right types of contracts and agreements in place for the money that they are investing, unless it's specifically a gift with no expectation of payment being returned or ownership of the company. Particularly when it's friends and family, you want to make sure that you have all of the contracts, that everyone's on the same page, that you know exactly how much equity you're giving, because they're still getting equity. And in fact, they're taking the most risk because you
Mm-hmm.
have the least traction or data to put behind it. So usually they get a nicer deal because of that. So don't get into a situation where you ruin your personal relationships because you didn't put in the proper kind of legal framework to make sure everyone knew what they were doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It might feel, it might feel less official because it's more about relationships and there's more maybe subjectivity. I would argue that there's as much subjectivity on a venture level. It's just hidden beneath a bunch of pattern matching. Um, but that's a really good point of like, if you're going to raise money from angels, friends, and family, be very explicit with them once that money is transferred. Like, hey, is this a gift? Or if it's not, what are the terms, and getting really
Yeah.
concrete about it. And, maybe even treating it, approaching it, even if it's people or individual investors, like approach it as if you're pitching uh, a top VC, because you're probably going to have a higher yes rate, and potentially might be able to get better terms if you come with a pitch deck prepared. So let's kind of dive into potential methods, because I feel like bootstrapping is a little bit too vague to say, okay, how do you bootstrap? And business loans is kind of straightforward, but I feel like there may be uh more creative formula. So like if I'm a person, let's say I may have I may have family and friends to reach out to. But, you know, if, as Femi just said, like, who can I reach out to other than family and friends? Um, how would you approach making those connections with potential angels? And if you're, uh, you know, like looking for capital from these strangers?
Well, to answer Femi's question directly, he's setting up a Impact Hub as a nonprofit and looking to reach out to family and friends. So his question is, what other organizations outside of that could he be reaching out to in this process? Well, we're going to get into that a little later, but as a nonprofit, you have other options in the form of grants and donations. So I think we'll dive into that a little bit later, but that's definitely something to keep top of mind because of what you're trying to build. And probably that's actually the most relevant thing because investors in their biggest priority is a return. So they want to know what's in it for them, what's the opportunity for them if they invest, how much money they're getting back. So if you are building a nonprofit, you know, the pitch would be more that this is a donation, or if there's some type of way that you plan on monetizing the nonprofit, make sure that's legal, but you could communicate that to them. Uh, in general, though, if you weren't founding a nonprofit, or if you are just interested in making connections with angels, there are established angel groups across the world. So look in your region. A lot of them are regionally specific because, again, it's just individuals. And the reason that angels gather in groups and form these kind of group organizations is they could invest more if they kind of pool their resources, and they could get access to better deals. So you could search online, you know, your area plus angel groups and see what comes up, or do some LinkedIn searches, or even from your own network. Ask if members of your network have connections to angels that have interest in the areas that you're in. Specifically for impact, that's a pretty easy ask for angels because a lot of them are motivated by what they're passionate about. So impact areas that connect with their core mission and their core passion, they're much more likely to be interested in learning more.
Nice. Cool. Any other thoughts on angel investors, friends and family, and just kind of getting this off the ground from a capital perspective?
Yeah, I think what you said earlier is really true. You should take this very seriously if you're asking your friends and family, and you know, they don't owe you anything, right? So if they invest, it's because they are in a position to, and they believe in your product. But it's a personal relationship, so I would say on a personal note, like, don't blow up your personal relationships if they, you know, don't want to invest. It might be a good idea to think of other ways that they could support you if they can't invest, you know, kind of like physical cash into your organization. So I think that's a nice thing to do, is to say, you know, you could either, this would be helpful if you would invest in this amount, or if you have access to these resources, or these are alternative ways that you could support my venture. If you like, yeah, or, you know, share my projects, all of that is valid as support from friends and family. And the last thing I'll say is all of these, you could find term sheets and examples of how to structure friends and family deals online. There's a lot of templates. I'd look at Y Combinator and you know, accelerators who have a lot of these templates available. So it shouldn't be too difficult to find something to base a contract off of.
Awesome. And we'll look for the links and post it in this article afterwards. All right. Next up, we have accelerators. So accelerators are usually pretty intensive from what I've seen, and usually they're designed for either to help you find product market fit really quickly or help you scale from product market fit really quickly. Usually they funnel into venture capital, and usually have connections to investors, and usually provide people with knowledge and expert support on the way. So we have, you know, the criteria that accelerators are ideal for you if you have a specific target customer and an offering that's like ready to use and selling or ready to sell. If you have specific areas that you need expertise in, but you don't necessarily want to or have the resources to pay, accelerators can be useful. They can have, legal and financial specialized expertise that you can't find everywhere. And it's accelerators can also be good if you're growing rapidly and are trying to figure out how to operationalize that growth and kind of take the business to the next level, as opposed to growing rapidly and having the operations of a seed stage company, even though you're in the growth stage. So that's kind of the criteria we have to get into accelerators. Would you add anything? Would you correct anything? Like who are accelerators a good fit for?
I think there's a difference between an accelerator and an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And generally the difference is that an incubator is a program that is designed for much earlier stage companies. So companies that they could be in the ideation stage, you're still developing it. And those are great if you're super early and you want kind of a place that will give you access to resources, potentially give you an opportunity to meet other founders and provide a supportive environment for you to build out the concept of your business.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely I'd look for incubators if that's something that you're interested in. And these are not set in stone terms, so
Right.
they could be they could move around a little bit. But
That's the
this is kind of,
confusing thing. Like in
yeah,
researching it, like people use them interchangeably. And that's why it's like
yeah,
there are two types of accelerators. But I think to your point, like incubators or like early stage accelerators are trying to find what you're actually going to be making. What is the product? What is the surface? What is the offering? And then more, I guess, conventional accelerators is you have the thing. Now let's grow and deliver that and grow the business to the next level. Is that kind of
yeah.
accurate?
That's accurate. And like you said, really the main thing to look at for an incubator or an accelerator is what growth stage of company are they really targeting.
Right.
So that'll be the best way to make sure that you're applying to the right place. Some accelerators invest and take equity in exchange. So definitely that's a great opportunity to explore. Some accelerators don't cost anything. You just have to apply and be accepted. And some accelerators have a fee but don't take any equity. So there's a lot of different ways that accelerators work, but it's important to know that the function of an accelerator is to provide support for founders to help them achieve specific goals. And that goal could be fundraising, it could be developing their product, it could be finding product market fit. Usually you'll understand more based on the type of accelerator you're applying to, but also those are important questions for you to ask when you're applying. What's the primary kind of outcome or support that you're looking for, and can this accelerator provide that? And I forgot what my second thing was, but yeah, generally that's something to look for when you're applying.
That's a really good point. And that actually like speaks to a reason that we started the Impact Alliance, because it's like people need a space to figure out what incubator or what accelerator they're going
Yeah,
to. Because a lot of times I see people sign up for an accelerator like, I want to grow this business, and they think they're at a different stage than they're actually at, or they're trying to fit themselves into a stage that isn't actually where they are. So I think one point is like when you're applying for these incubators and accelerators, don't just say, oh, they will invest in equity, I need that money, I'm going to apply. And then fit your application to what they need. Like really be honest with yourself in terms of like, where am I and what do I need? And then only apply to the incubators or accelerators that support that specific need and direction, because they will take you, as Shelley said, they will take you in a specific direction. And if it's not where you need to go, it will delay you. It will cost you time and money and probably frustrate you to the point where I've seen people almost give up on their idea because they weren't ready for the accelerator, or they entered the wrong accelerator with the wrong types of people. So it's going to be really important to like not just apply because they have funding, or not just apply because they have experts or connections to investors. It's like, does this actually match your direction and your stage, if you're being honest with yourself? Um, Anything you would add on top of that?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Eddie, well, Eddie, like any like processes, or we have some guides in this resource list for like lists of different accelerators. Any thoughts on like finding the right accelerator or successfully applying, other than what I just said?
Yeah, there's a lot of databases out there that you could use to search for a program. F6S is one that I've used in the past, and that I've seen a lot of accelerators exist on it. You could build a profile for yourself, and you could be recruited by or seek out accelerators through that. And I think, don't underestimate the power of Google. There are a lot of accelerators that are funded by governments, or, private organizations or nonprofit organizations that want to support a certain part of business or a certain field. And, you may not know that those programs are available. So just Google your region, your area, your company focus. If you're working on climate tech solutions, Google Climate Tech Accelerator in your area, or remote climate tech accelerator. So there's a lot of smaller programs, I think is what I'm saying, out there that you could find that will provide some support, and definitely worthwhile to search for them in addition to kind of the larger, more established accelerator programs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would probably double down on that. Like instead of just going like, oh, I want to be a Y Combinator, like search specifically. Like if you're an ed tech startup in like California, like ed tech California accelerators, like
Yeah.
really be super explicit. Like Femi, for you, it could be like um, community or economic development Nigeria accelerators or incubators, and being really specific to what you're building or what your vision is when you search for them will really help with the vetting process, because now you're just like taking out all of the ones that aren't relevant to what you're building, which is again like I don't want to under stress how like harmful it could be to get into the wrong accelerator or incubator that's not aligned with what you want to do, because it'll just waste your time and probably equity and probably money as well. So cool. All right, moving into, I feel like before we move into venture capital, what do you think what do you think about going over crowdfunding before we go into venture capital?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, cool. So we have bootstrapping, which is just use your own money. We have business loans, which is probably wait until you have a running business, or if you have a lot of personal collateral. Then we have friends, family, and angels, which is like treat it as if you're raising money from VCs. And then we have incubators and accelerators, which is basically making sure it's aligned with where you're at. Now we have crowdfunding. So it's pretty much what it sounds like. You're raising money from a lot of different people. There are a few different ways you can do it. You can do traditional crowdfunding, which is basically just pre-selling some sort of product. This is like Kickstarter. If you look at Kickstarter or Indiegogo, it's like, we want to build this product, give us the money so we can build the product, and then we'll give you the product, essentially. And then we have loan crowdfunding, which is basically raising debt money from a large group of people. You can do that through tools like Kiva, which is linked in the guide. And then we have equity crowdfunding, which you're selling actual shares to a large group of people. And WeFunder is a great platform, especially for impact-driven companies, to do equity crowdfunding. And then we have crowdfunding being ideal. And obviously each type of crowdfunding, maybe we can dive a little bit into each type if we have time. But really, if you have an existing audience, that makes it a lot easier to do crowdfunding. And if you have a kind of viral business idea that people are naturally excited about and naturally want to share, that could make crowdfunding relevant as well. And if you have some like a cool kind of playing into this virality, if you have like a cool new technology that you have mock-ups of and like can get people excited about, like building a Kickstarter can really take you from 0 to 1. So what are your thoughts on crowdfunding and when to do it?
I think crowdfunding is great. And I think that in certain situations, it makes sense to incorporate your friends and family round into a crowdfunding platform.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the three platforms that you outlined, yeah, it kind of depends, a mixture of what are you raising money for and what type of funding are you looking for. Kickstarter makes sense if you're specifically just raising money for a specific direct to consumer product. So if you have a new brand of shoe or sunglasses and you want to produce and sell it, you can raise money for that on Kickstarter. You're pre-selling that particular product and raising money to produce it. And usually that involves incentives for the people who will pre-buy your product, and you'll give them swag or free product or a lower price point. But they're not buying ownership in your company. And that's important to remember. So that's a specific type of use case. Platforms like Kiva are great. We talked about business loans earlier, so this is kind of a in-between place where you're crowdfunding a loan at a lower interest rate from a lot of people. So they're getting that money back, but they're loaning you this money, in the interim. And on the last piece for crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, shall we say, there's a lot of exciting things happening in that space. So up until last year, there were limits to how much money you could raise on a crowdfunding platform. And those limits were set in place by the feds, basically. And that limit was raised last year. So you went from only being able to raise $1 million to being able to raise a maximum of $5 million on an equity crowdfunding platform. And so that's opened up a lot of opportunity for companies because they could now equity raise significant amount of money. Another great thing about equity crowdfunding, especially on platforms like WeFunder or Republic, is although you may crowdfund from a lot of individuals, they don't all have a place on your cap table. So let's say you crowdfunded from 200 people, they each put in $1,000 and you grew that. You're not going to have 200 individuals on your cap table. And cap table is basically the document that outlines who owns what from your company. So if I invested and I have one share, I'm on your cap table that I own a share of your company or a percentage of your company. WeFunder and other crowdfunding campaigns, they bundle up all these individuals into a SPAC. Can NGOs see crowdfunding? I'm not fully sure how that works, Femi, so I don't want to answer that directly. I'd have to look into that specifically. I think the question is, can you give equity at an NGO? And I would say no, but I do know that there are options on WeFunder that are not equity options. There's options where you could fundraise for a rev share, where you could offer percentage of future revenue as the return for it. So potentially, but I don't know enough to fully answer that question. You have to do a little bit of digging on their platform. But yeah,
And
this might be good. Go ahead.
well, and I feel like with NGOs and or nonprofits, you're just getting into kind of like grassroots person to
Yeah,
person donation at that point.
yeah, you're better off running a donation campaign, in my opinion, on like
Sorry.
Indiegogo or something.
Yeah, continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I just don't want to get into the weeds too much, but
Hmm.
you know, if you are interested in equity crowdfunding, definitely worth a look. And they have things in place that make it a lot easier for you, just as a equity crowdfunder, than managing, two 200 or 300 different individual donation, not donations, investments.
Cool. Cool. Any ideas about how to go about crowdfunding?
Yes. Um, First thing is make sure that you have all of your documents in order. So your financials, your pitch deck, if you have any marketing assets like a video or any type of graphics, that's very helpful when you're making a crowdfunding campaign. And then when you reach out to those platforms and they think you're a good fit, they'll basically sign you onto the platform, and you'll have a campaign page that you could then populate with your pitch deck or any information that you want people to look at. And the one other thing I'd say about crowdfunding campaigns is the more people invest in on your page, in your company, on that platform, kind of the more popular it gets. So just like Kickstarter works, where when there's a lot of activity on a particular campaign, it'll bump it up sort of to the top of the list. Same deal with equity crowdfunding. So if you do have friends and family or angels that are interested in making an investment, I would suggest having them make that investment through your crowdfunding campaign page, because then you're going to capture that momentum, and that's just going to show other people who don't have a personal connection to you, oh wow, this person just raised like $50,000. I feel more excited to fundraise, to invest because of that. So that would be my tip.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If you have, and also it probably just makes it more convenient because
Yes.
now they're all one item on your cap table instead of separate agreements for each friend, family member, and angel. If you have like 20 people who are like, yeah, we can throw in some form of money, like it makes a lot more sense to just throw up a crowdfunding page and have them give you the money through the crowdfunding page and have the chance for other people to send you money as well. Cool. Um, and then kind of adjacent to that, and we're not going to dive super deep into this. We're probably going to do a deep dive into this specific area soon. But like Web3 and crypto fundraising is another form of crowdfunding. And if you are in the Web3 or crypto space, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but usually it's going to involve some form of NFTs or becoming a DAO and you're selling tokens in your company. So it's basically just Web3 native equity crowdfunding. Like equity crowdfunding is kind of the default for how Web3 companies raise money. Um, and so there's that. We're going to do another deep dive on that later. Okay, so we did crowdfunding. So let's touch on venture real quick. And then I know Femi is kind of specifically involved in this nonprofit space. So let's make sure we get to that. So I mean, venture capital is pretty much what people think of when they think of raising money. And honestly, that's probably not a good thing. Because I see a lot of people chasing venture money when they're just not ready for it, or it would be better done through equity crowdfunding, or maybe they could just bootstrap it. And there's like something they're not seeing in terms of creating a halfway step to where they are. But really, venture capital is raising money from larger firms, accredited investors. Usually these checks are, I mean, from like 500K to billions of dollars. And basically, there are two types of venture. There's debt and equity, which are kind of self-explanatory. Venture capital is really for people who have a strong operating business, have a strong vision, want to grow really quickly, maybe have a capital intensive business, um, and have traction. If you don't have traction and you try to raise venture capital, you're going to hear the word traction so much that it's going to make you sick. Like there are so many people who are like, I'm trying to raise money, but I don't have traction. It's like, okay, well, now you know what to do. So what are your thoughts on venture? You could talk, speak on either debt or equity, when to do both.
Yeah, uh, you are spot on, and it's venture capital isn't for everyone, and I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication around the role that venture capital plays in a business. Honestly, ideally, most places would not get venture capital because it's a massive responsibility and a huge burden for the founder. And not because it can't do good or be valuable, but because when investors make an investment in your company from venture capital, they're expecting very specific things, and what they're expecting is a massive return. So unless you're ready and willing to scale exponentially, like 10x, 20x in a few months with the addition of this capital, then this probably isn't the right path for you, and it means you're giving up control of your company. So you open yourself up to those vulnerabilities, and so that's kind of like the con of it. And it's less of a con and more like make sure you know that you are the right candidate for venture capital. Some companies need venture capital, benefit from it, especially if you're building a tech product or you can see a very solid product market fit and you have a massive potential market segment, a lot of opportunities. So those are things that are really attractive for venture capital. And if you're not in that category, maybe explore other options or proceed with caution when you have these conversations. Um, Venture debt is something that is only relevant if you are raising money with venture capital, because venture debt is a loan that you could get from a bank that uses as collateral the money you've raised already from VCs. So if you're not going to raise money from venture capital, venture debt isn't relevant for you. If you have, then venture debt is a great option because it enables you to get additional cash flow without giving up more equity. So that's kind of the short of it. Uh, venture capitalists have a range. Like there's VCs that invest in early stage companies, VCs that only invest in much later stage companies, VCs that are very specific to certain areas. So there's VCs that only invest in education technology companies or ag tech companies. So in the same vein of look for accelerators that are specific to your focus, if you are going to raise venture capital, it'll be helpful for you to look for VCs that have expertise and a track record in your specific sector.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. I mean, can't really expand upon that. I mean, I'm sure we'll do another session where we dive into how to raise money from venture capitalists. But long story short, if you're raising money from venture capitalists, know the market opportunity, like be able to quantify what the market and addressable market is for your solution, why you're better than what exists, and definitely show that you have some form of people buying into it, or at least saying they want what you have, something that symbolizes it's ready to go. Cool. So nonprofits. We got to these last, but I want to make sure that we kind of I feel like with nonprofits, it's kind of obvious like what options are available. So let's talk a little bit more about how to go about it, because I know raising grants and donations can just be a real struggle. So when we're talking about grants, what ideas, or with your experience, what is the best or most efficient way to go about looking for grants and writing them and all of
Yeah.
that?
So there are a lot of resources online where you could search for grants. And again, being specific about your sector will give you a higher likelihood of finding grants that are more relevant to what you are looking for. And you'll therefore have a higher likelihood of receiving the grant. So if you are in a field that's focused on economic development or ag tech or climate, whatever it is, there are grants out there that will be specific to that. So kind of again, also look also for who is issuing the grants. So governments are huge issuers of grants. They have a lot of money that they create grants for, and they award it. So your local government kind of website that'll have an area for grants available. That's a good place to start. And then also private organizations often have grants that are sector specific for specific purposes. So I think being as specific as you can about what you're specifically raising money for and seeking donations for is important.
Cool. Yeah, and one tool that I want to highlight is Open Grants. It allows you to fill out a profile and it matches you automatically with grants in the right area. I don't know how expansive the database is, but it looks like there's a lot of stuff from around the world in Open Grants. So if you go into there, it's opengrants.io, create an account. It's free. And I just found this program. I'm not like plugging it for any reason, but I just saw it and I was like, oh, this makes searching for grants easier. Cool. So I think with grants, it's just, yeah, I like to add on to that, just being specific about what you're looking for, and that will make the process of writing a grant much simpler. Being very clear about what you need the grant for and what positive outcome it will help create is really important. This is where you want to break each ask down, almost make a theory of change for each grant ask, using the theory of change framework to like structure, okay, we get this money, here's where we put it, here are the stakeholders involved, here's what change it will make, here are the measurable outcomes. That's how you persuade government officials that you know what you're doing and you know what change needs to be made and why this grant will contribute to the change more than another organization. And it's kind of sad that it's kind of like this competitive space, but that's really what it is. So you just need to make yourself look like a better option than other organizations. And for donations, like how would you go about raising donations with your experience, in founding a nonprofit?
Yeah. So it's important, that you are a registered nonprofit. So if you are not a 501c3 or whatever the designation is in your home country, it will be difficult to raise certain money because a huge point of donations is that they're often tax deductible because it's a donation and you're not expecting some type of return from it. So definitely making sure that you are either partnered with or you are yourself a 501c3 nonprofit and are legally recognized as such would be step one. And then there are a lot of tools that you could use on a website or on social to collect donations. I think DonorBox is one that you could collect and make that available on a website if you want people to collect donations, and you can market what you're working on to source donations. The biggest thing for a nonprofit is to make sure that your financials are in order, because nonprofits can be very easily taken advantage of and be used as kind of places where corruption happens. You want to make sure that you have a separate bank account for that nonprofit, and all of the donations are, very easily tracked, and that you can account for every single penny, because you're going to be held to a higher standard because it's not income. People are making that donation with an expectation.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, that takes us to the end of the hour here. Any specific questions, Femi, that you have for me and Shelley or Jeremy? Anything that you want to add on, just based on what you heard here?
No, I think she's explicit enough. Everything has been said in well detailed, and yeah, I've really learned a lot today, and I'm very, very grateful. Thanks, guys, for setting this up.
Thanks for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, same here. Nothing to add. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today. And Adam for hosting. This was informative, even as somebody who's spent quite a few years in this ecosystem already.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll have to post this as a podcast episode, YouTube video, all of that. Cool.